You're now tuned in to The Investor Show, where we teach simple wealth creation for the common investors. With investment advisor, award-winning author, international speaker, and founder of Royal Financial Investment Group, Prince Dykes.
Once again, guys, welcome to The Investor Show. As always, this is your host, Prince Dykes, coming to you guys on this nice, beautiful Friday morning. It's always beautiful in Hawaii, but I don't know where you're at in the world, but I hope it's good to you as well. Hope you guys been enjoying the show and liking the show. I know you guys probably saw the topic in the new election, is Donald's America's Trump card. Is Donald America's Trump card. As always, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share button, all the other great stuff. You guys got some questions or feedback, drop some comments, send some emails. But before we jump into the show, let me cut into it and give you guys a couple of words from my sponsors. Oh, yeah, that's right. I don't have any sponsors. But if you want to be a sponsor, shoot me an email and let's talk about it. But anyway, I don't have a lot of time. I definitely know you guys don't have a lot of time, so we're going to jump straight into it. So on today's topic, I brought back, if you guys haven't seen James Fortland's past episode that he was here that you guys liked and loved, bringing in James, who has spent over 40-something years on Wall Street, managed billions of dollars, $billion fund manager, all these, he's seen the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and with this election, this monumental election that we just had, a lot of you guys have been writing me and asking me, hey, Prince, what should I do? What's going on? What should I buy? What should I sell? So you know what? Hey, I said, hey, James, we got to do this episode on Friday. It's a lot of people asking. So he's here now. So Mr. Fortland, let's give a loud round of applause for Mr. James Fortland. How you doing, Mr. Fortland?
How are you? I'm afraid the weather is never as nice in New York as it probably is in Hawaii.
But it all matters on what's on the inside. If you can just see the Hawaii weather and just feel it on the inside, then I guess that.
Absolutely, I got it. I keep it inside me all the time. It makes me nice and warm. Yeah, you don't live in New York because of the weather. There's a lot of other great things about New York, but I wouldn't put the weather in the top 10. Yeah. Anyway, it was a crazy night last night.
Crazy night. Yeah, we just had the new president, or Donald Trump is now our president. What do you think of this? Did you think this would happen?
Yes, I thought he was going to win. I thought the polls were, first of all, polling is kind of weird. I think a lot of people don't understand that news organizations use polls really to direct public opinion, not to reflect public opinion. So to steal like what Trump was saying, everything's rigged, well, the polls are always just kind of manipulated because they're trying to get everyone to do a certain thing. As you get closer to the event, the polls all of a sudden tighten up, because the pollsters don't want to look silly and go, well, I picked Hillary by 10 points and Trump won by 2 points. I look like I don't know what I'm doing. And so as you got closer, I think it was more of a fact. It wasn't that Trump was gaining so much at the end. I think it was the polls were really reflecting more the real reality of what was going on. The polls still at 7:30 on election night, that's New York time, were basically saying she was going to win, which I wasn't buying that at all. There was too many weird things going on. The market had traded very poorly. That's usually a sign that you're going to get a change. And basically Hillary was kind of the status quo candidate, and Trump has been kind of, like we said, he might be the Trump card, but up at this point he's still like the wild card. We're just not really sure yet. So if you noticed, when it got really clear that he was going to win last night, and a lot of the media was very slow to call states, like what was really funny is it was almost a dead giveaway. If Hillary looked like she was going to win it, pretty much except for Virginia, they called it pretty quickly. If Trump was up and it was close, they'd keep saying the state was a toss-up. they knew he won Florida like probably a good hour before they called it. They knew there was really Ohio also. Ohio probably sat there for a good 45, 50 minutes before they called it. Everybody knew he won it already. Pennsylvania was a little different because they were really slow. They were very slow from the time the polls closed to when they started like showing the data. So Pennsylvania was kind of strange, and Pennsylvania's kind of an odd state anyway because it's you have kind of a lot of rural and country areas, and then you have two big cities. You have Pittsburgh and Philly that really dominate the map in Pennsylvania. So, you have that going on. Anyway, if you notice, when it looked like Trump was going to win, the futures sold off enormously. I mean, they were down 800. I think maybe I read. I didn't actually notice this. I read. I think they were down 900 points at one time.
Yeah, now, it was pretty crazy how it happened. Not to cut you off anything. Going back to what you were saying about the election piece. When I saw him take Ohio, I was like, whoa. And then when I saw him take Florida, I kind of knew that it was over. But like you said, how you was going into the reaction, that's the next thing that I want to talk about. So, I want to get everybody to stay tuned as we get into the Trump reaction. All right.
Mm-hmm.
You are tuned into The Investor Show.
So with that, what was that reaction? How would you explain that reaction?
Well, first, it was kind of weird. It was there was kind of a sell-off because a lot of the powers that be were surprised, supposedly. I would say you got to be really careful of the futures markets. I always say the futures markets play for the TV audience. Ever since CNBC and Bloomberg TV and Fox Business and all these stations now are watching, it's 24/7 on the stock market. I have a tendency to think that colors the futures market. It's kind of like they put on a show almost in the morning or overnight, and they don't necessarily reflect what traders really think. I believe I told you the last time we spoke that I thought if Trump wins, we were going to have a big sell-off right away because that's kind of like the way it was sitting at the time. But
you called it big time. You definitely said on the last. It's definitely recorded and published that you said, hey, we're going to have. Everybody's going to get scared. Everybody's going to slam off. That's why when I saw it, I was like, James, you definitely was on to something because we definitely saw that big sell. But James, so people out there who, when you said the word Dow Jones futures, because I had people saying, "Hey man, the stock market is crashing." I'm like, dude, the stock market's not even open right now. So could you explain to people what the Dow Jones future is? That regular old Joe Blow person that saw the stocks flopping in the middle of the night.
Right. This is really futures trading. Futures are kind of like people are betting on future moves, like when the market opens. They're kind of. It's almost like think of it as like you're betting on horse races or a boxing match, and it's 3 weeks out before the boxing match even happens, and you're already taking bets. And as you get closer and closer to the date, the odds keep shifting up and down. Like all of a sudden you find out one of the fighters has a cold, so suddenly the odds drop very significantly for him to win the fight. And then so the futures kind of play like that. It's kind of like a big game. You got to think of it as entertainment. It's not necessarily real. When they start talking about overseas markets, like they say the Japanese market is down, well, that's a whole different story because that's actually really a real, that would be the Tokyo Stock Exchange. That's stocks that are traded in Japan, or you might see Hong Kong or some of these other, or maybe even some of the European markets like you might see in London. The futures are kind of like, it's kind of speculating really what's going to happen when the market opens. And at first, there was like this big show where they sold off huge, which like a lot of your viewers clearly picked up on. They were nervous because it scares people sometimes. Then if you noticed this morning, when the market did finally open at 9:30, it opened down, but then by the end of the day, you had a pretty strong rally. Now, there was some other weird things going on, what a lot of people don't know, which I just found out fairly recently. It's been reported from a couple of different sources, is that during the morning, the traders on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange were chanting, lock her up, while when the market opened. They were all chanting this at the opening bell.
Wow. They was on the New York Stock Exchange saying, hey, let's lock the market up and not let it fall?
Well, no, they were saying let's lock Hillary up.
Lock her up. Wow.
Yeah, lock her up. They wanted to
Wall Street was happy.
Right. Well, I think this is the way I look at it. The more you see, one of the problems you have with Trump is Trump was a phenomenon. He's not a regular politician. And when he ran for president, he showed up with all the baggage that a normal guy like you and me would have. And what they're going to do is they're going to drag out, oh, my God, that girl he went out with when he was 13, he was mean to her and didn't buy her a flower. And, she's going to go on TV and cry about how he was mean to her. And, everybody, whereas when you deal with professional politicians, their whole life is prearranged. And they do everything so that when they run for president, no 13-year-old that they went out with when they were 13 is going to show up anywhere because that stuff has all been taken care of ahead of time. So when you deal with professional politicians, they have this very polished image, and Trump didn't have that image. Trump was he had been in reality TV. He was a fairly famous, outspoken New Yorker. I mean, he had a lot of things going on. He's been married 3 times. He's he's done a lot of things. So what I think has happened, and what happened with this whole election, is the media couldn't understand him, and they didn't understand the whole Trump phenomenon. So they never sat down, none of the media companies ever went to a Trump rally or actually talked to Trump supporters and said, what do you really think? Why do you like Trump? What's going on in your life that attracts you to this kind of message? They never did that. They just said, well, he's a racist and he's this. And they just rattled off these pat things and sort of discarded him and discarded all the people who were enthusiastic by his message. And that's not really, that you're not going to find out much. And I think that's one of the reasons the polls were so inaccurate. And then, so I think the market, when Trump won, the market, at first there was a little of that reflection. Oh my God, this crazy guy, he might be he's a messiah. He's a racist. He's this, he's that. He's blah, blah, blah. He never showed his tax returns and blah, 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 and all this stuff, But very quickly, the market started to digest. And what do we really know about Donald Trump? Well, we know obviously he's had a very populist message. He's criticized the government heavily for being basically incompetent and being too much government, the whole idea of the government doing everything for everybody. But even more than that, he just said these guys don't know what they're doing. And I think a lot of people who walk around and say, okay, we just gave Iran a nuclear weapon, so they're not going to make other nuclear weapons. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Or free trade sounds really cool, but somehow we seem to be on the losing end of all these things. We're not really making out. Whereas Mexico, we've run a trade deficit with Mexico 22 straight years. Well, maybe that's just a statistical anomaly, but that's something there. Jobs are fleeing. Now, Mexico also, by the way, has a much better corporate tax policy than the U.S. does, so that's why a lot of companies are moving down there. So they're moving there, and then they're turning around and they're selling the goods right back into the U.S., so it's sort of interesting.
Oh, wow.
But so the fear over Trump was he's not the status quo. He's going to mess up all these cozy relationships that we all see in Washington, all the deals that everybody has made, all the lobbying. The media just couldn't figure him out because he was self-funded, or by people like you and me just sent him $5 or $25. That's where all the money came from. He had a few big people around him who were kind of these PACs that were sort of promoting him or attacking Hillary. But he kind of to some degree, the way the media has presented him, he's kind of this wild, crazy man that we just didn't know what to expect. But Wall Street is very smart. And the people in the know. What do we really know about Trump, or what do we suspect? We suspect that Trump is the guy. He's putting the band back together. He's talking to Arthur Laffer, who did the Laffer curve. He's talking to all the guys involved with the Reagan Revolution in the early 1980s. And that was a huge economic boom coming out of a disastrous 1970s, many similar issues, incompetent government, bad policies, too big government, a lot of the same things, a lot of the same problems, a lot of people not working. There was hyperinflation, where now maybe a lot of people will say we have deflation to some degree. But there's a lot of similarities. Now, let's go back and look at Reagan. Reagan took guys like Arthur Laffer, said, wow, taxes are really high. If we simplify the tax code and we cut taxes a little bit, the government's actually going to make more money, because we're going to encourage a lot of transactions. We're going to encourage business formation. We're going to encourage businesses to be closed. We're going to encourage a lot of things to happen. And all those transactions are going to generate taxes. And,
so James, before we go any further, I want to make sure we do like a little recap to where people know exactly where you are as far as when you spoke about the Dow Jones futures. James was stating that, it's a 24-hour market where people place bets that where the market is going to be at by this time or expiration date. Hey, I think the market is going to be here. And what the media was doing, the media was using that to say, hey, look, the market is up, the market is down. But the actual market doesn't open up until 9:30 on Wall Street. So if it's at midnight, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, what market are they talking about? I knew a lot of people was lost about that, and I'm glad that you brought that up. What you were seeing was these people that, you have people that can trade the market, pre-market, after market, you have a Forex market and stuff like that. Now, what James was hinting on about when he was talking about when you look at Japan or Tokyo's market, that's a real market. He was saying, hey, we're in different time zones, and that Tokyo market could actually be open, and that's the real market versus us. We have people that are trading right now as we're speaking of where they think the Dow Jones is going to be, where they think the S&P 500 is going to be. These people, when they saw Trump winning and gaining pressure, they started betting the market was going to go down. That wasn't the real market. That was people doing that to the actual market.
They're speculating on what's going to happen at 9:30. So the futures are all like they're trying to predict what's going on. And a lot of times the predictions...
And that's what people saw.
Yes. And that's why people thought the market was down 900 points because, Trump has been presented. I mean, I have friends in Europe, and they're like, oh, my God, this isn't going to be the guy who's going to have the codes. He's going to start a nuclear war. And I'm like, he's not going to start a nuclear war. He's like, what do we going to go back. Why did it start? Why did it stabilize? Why? First of all, the futures to some degree become a self-fulfilling prophecy. They kind of work it out, and while this thing is bouncing around and selling off, all these guys are suddenly collecting all this information and going, wow, you know what? Trump isn't crazy. He's talking to Arthur Laffer. He's talking about bringing Larry Kudlow into the cabinet. Larry Kudlow is on TV now. We see him all the time. He's talking about doing a lot. He's already announced he wants to make major tax cuts. He wants to simplify the tax code. Wow, sounds like Ronald Reagan. It's like, now, mind you, by saying all these things, I don't mean all these things are perfect, but I'm just talking now 3 hours into this thing and the futures are bouncing all over, suddenly we're getting the sun's coming up, Trump's won this thing, and people are like, you know what, maybe it's nuts. Maybe we kind of do know what to expect. Maybe we kind of know what's going on. And that's why today, when the market did open, it only opened down a little bit. It stabilized, and at the end of the day, we ended up with a pretty strong rally on about double volume it normally trades at. So it was what were we up 250 points? I think it was 1.4% or something like that. However, now I put a caveat because we went from the futures saying we're going to be down 900, the market closed up. We're in a very volatile situation right now. There's going to be a lot of crazy stuff going to go on in the next 2 weeks. You see there's protests in New York that Trump won. Those are MoveOn.org people already organized a protest over Trump, right? there's a lot of happy people on the losing side, on the Democratic side, because let's face it, not only do they not have the presidency now, they don't have the Congress. I think there's 38 state houses that are controlled by Republicans. And now we're going to pick
both.
Yeah, and now we're going to pick, right. They control the Congress, the Senate, and the House. They have the executive branch. They have most state capitals, like 38 out of 50 states. They have the state capitals, right, that control that. And now we're going to pick court. So the Democrats are they're looking for angles here because they don't have a lot of leverage right now. They're hurt. And they also, let's face it, they had to go, who did they run? They ran an old guy named Bernie Sanders. What was he, like 70-something years old? And they ran Hillary Clinton, and she's no spring chicken. She's like in her late 60s. So it doesn't seem to be any real young, up-and-coming Democrats that are that are big enough yet. So they have a lot of issues. So they're gonna see that for quite a while here every minute. So the market's going to start looking at those things. The market is going to start looking and say, hey, wait a minute, what's the repercussions if they change NAFTA? What's the repercussions if they go back in and renegotiate the Iran nuke deal? What's the repercussions if we actually repeal Obamacare, which is another big thing that really helped Trump that everybody was trying to ignore? Let's face it, most people got their premium increases in October, and the premium increases are astronomical for most people. There's no way you can afford it. It's totally unaffordable. And then if you can't afford it, the deductibles are so high, you can't really use it anyway. And so it's like crazy. So I think a lot of people got that in the mail in October. So here we are in November, and we're looking at all those sort of kind of blue-collar people in Michigan that normally would maybe vote with Democrats or probably voted for Barack Obama. Now suddenly they're sitting there going, wow, this really didn't work out too good. How in the world am I going to afford this?
Yeah.
We need to do something.
You're 100% right. So now that you said that, we're going to cut into a quick segue real quick, and we're going to jump into now that this happened, now that this Trump phenomenon has happened, the market has had the futures market has had a knee-jerk reaction, and now we're coming back. What are we trying to see what's going on? We're going to cut into a segue, and we're going to talk about what should people do now. All right?
Stay tuned for The Investor Show.
All right, now that we're back, we're still here with James here. He's going to get into now. We spoke about what seeing, the Trump win means, and we spoke about this pullback that we saw in the aftermarket that didn't carry over, that we ended up into a rally, all this crazy stuff, all this volatility. Now, people on the sideline, people asking me, hey, Prince, man, I seen this. I seen this collapse. I have money sitting up. I have my cash. I have a 401k. What should I do? I want to get into investing. Should I jump in now? What should I do? What would you say to that person, James?
Well, I think right now you're going to probably first of all, I think it's going to be very volatile for a while. I think even when Trump goes into this thing, he settles on a cabinet, and his cabinet is, by at least a lot of people's standards, a very high-quality cabinet. I think that there's still a lot of unknowns out there because he is just, he came from out of the blue. So he's not used to working the political machine. And remember, you heard a lot that Trump was challenging the Washington elites, the Washington establishment. Well, the Washington establishment is not going to give up power so easily. This is like a club. And this is why you had people like maybe the ex-President Bush say they weren't going to vote for Trump. Because Trump's not in the club. Hillary's in the club. But Trump's not in the club. And these guys have like a club where they want to keep the power. They want to run everything. And that club is going to fight back. So it's a matter of how hard Trump hits them. So you're going to have a lot of volatility, especially, I would say, probably for 6 weeks or so. What I would do if I was looking at, I would say when you see those weekdays, like today it was up, so don't buy on the rallies. But if tomorrow it backtracks another 140, 100 points, it goes back down, and I wouldn't be surprised if this happened. I would look, spend a little money. Maybe you want to buy a little bit. Now, the problem is we're almost at an all-time high here anyway. So I would really, I would only buy on down days. And I would probably look, like, for example, if it looks a little stormy and things like, say tomorrow we have some crazy thing happens, like Trump goes to meet Obama at a meeting and, there's some nutty, there's like a terrorist attack or somebody tries to shoot Trump, right? That's going to rock the market really hard. So the market will temporarily maybe sell down, particularly on a Friday afternoon. You might want to think about sort of averaging into that hole a little bit like that. Those are all, when it goes down, these are all buying opportunities. Now, it could carry through to Monday.
James, so now when so I want to recap what you just said. You're essentially saying, hey, just set back. It's going to be a lot of volatility. When he's saying volatility, he's talking about things going up and down. And you're saying, hey, when you see those bad days, when you see that market drop 100, 200 points, things get a little weak, things look a little gloomy, buy a little bit. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you just got to use all the weakness to your advantage. Now, does that mean if it's down 140 on Friday, it still could be down another 200 on Monday? But on the other, it might be up 300. It's going to be kind of crazy for a while, and a lot of this is not really going to be, in the long run, it's not going to be that meaningful. Right, it's going to make everybody a little like, people are going to be, wow, the market's really volatile. What can we expect? And, you're going to get Jim Cramer and everybody else is going to be on TV, and everybody's going to be throwing their opinion about what's going on. So I think there's going to be a lot of, and the only way for like a regular investor is just be patient and just kind of get it. You're probably not going to hit a low. And if you miss one, there's probably going to be another day that's going to go down again. So don't cry like, oh my God, I missed the low. I'm never going to be able to buy anything now. Don't let that pressure you. You got to just feed in very slowly. Now, if you're not really active and you just want to get involved, like again, the buy days are days when it's down. You buy like an index fund and then you just sit there and forget about it. And I wouldn't spend the whole roll right now. I would be real careful. I just kind of average in slowly. We talked about this the other day, but what you might be able to do now is you might be able to, because of the volatility, you might be able to average, say, 5 worth of average gain might happen in 6 weeks because there's going to be so much up and down.
Wow.
And that would be the way, yeah, because I think you're going to have issues about who he's going to put in the cabinet. Now, Trump has problems because a lot of the traditional Republicans don't like him either. So he has his own party issues. So there's a lot like what's going to happen with Paul Ryan. Are they going to try to fire him? Or to me, what's been a big because I have a tendency to think Trump is going to want to get rid of Paul Ryan, maybe not right away, but I think eventually that might be a long-term goal is to get rid of Paul Ryan. What about the head chairman of the Fed? I know he's criticized Yellen like a lot. Even since 2012, he's criticized Yellen. Or what I think I told you last time, we call her Mother Goose. So he's giving her a hard time. She's an easy money person. She's a print money and borrow money, borrow and spend, and that's what we got to do to get the economy going. I have a tendency to think Trump is going to look for somebody who's more like a monetarist or something, like an old school guy like Paul Volcker is going to say, no, we got to pay our bills, we got to pay off the deficit, we got to cut down on all this spending, we got to get ourselves organized. We can't just print money like crazy. We got to kind of ring the. Interest rates have to go up. We have to create a spread between short-term rates and long-term rates. There's a lot of stuff that's got to go on. We can't just be borrowing and spending on nothing. We got to, Go ahead.
James, to recap on what you had said earlier, you said that, hey, when people get in, you say buy a little bit. What would you tell them to buy? What would you buy? Like, hey, you say, hey, buy a little.
For most small investors right now, I just think like a lot of these index funds, I think in the long run are going to do really well. I mean, like it's so hard because investments are so personal, and you really have to know a lot about who you're dealing with, like who's actually buying these things. On the other end of the call, who's listening to it? Is it that little lady who's 90 years old with $100,000, but she might have been buying stocks for the last 50 years? Or is there a little old lady who's 90 years old with $100,000 who's never bought a stock? They might be the same age. They might be both widows. They might be both living on Social Security, but they're two different kinds of investors. And so this is what you got to be a little careful about, these kind of generalized prescriptions. I would look, I just think there's, like you look for those big companies, those quality stocks, like the bigger blue chip companies. I would not play around with small stuff or speculative stuff in this kind of environment, because I just think the market's going to have so much volatility. And the big stocks are going to kind of move up and down because all these mutual funds are going to be buying them and selling them and buying them and selling them back and forth. And it's like the same 100 stocks. It's like the GEs and the Microsofts and all those big, the Pfizers and the Johnson & Johnsons and all those, you want to have solid, you want to have your feet in a solid spot. Now, if the market starts to sell off heavy and it goes for 2 or 3 days and the volume starts to, the volume skyrockets, then you got to look to put the brakes on this thing. Either you're going to, you might want to go to a short, or you might want to look and just buy gold and things like that, because even a gold index, it will probably skyrocket if things go. I just wouldn't bet on it. I think we're going to have a lot of short-term volatility because there's going to be a lot of one-off weird stuff. There's going to be protests. There's going to be picking a cabinet. There's going to be infighting in the Republican Party. There's going to be pushback from the Democrats who lost and crying. Like today you saw, what am I going to tell my children? You're going to tell your children, grow up and get a good education and get a job, save your money. That's what you're going to tell your children. What are you going to tell your children? I love these. It's scary when you read Facebook, silly stuff you see on Facebook. Stuff like that. I mean, it's like my hometown is kind of funny. There was a guy there's like a Facebook group for the hometown, and he goes, listen, I know people are sad. I'm off today with my daughter. If you need a hug, just call me, and I'll come over and hug you. and this guy is like, you got to know the guy, but he's like a character. It's really funny. And all day long he was talking to people, and then he was put on. He goes, oh, I'm at the park in the middle of town. If anybody wants to meet me, I'll be here another hour. You just need somebody to talk to. You just need a hug. You just need whatever.
You are now tuned in to The Investor Show, where we teach simple wealth creation.
Because a lot of people, because the way the media portrayed Trump, and it happened to Hillary as well, but the way all these negatives that you heard.
Now, I had another question, right? So you spoke about, hey, if you're long term, you want to, you say, hey, buy the index little by little. Now, let's say I'm that regular Joe smoking telly that go to school or whatever the case may be, and I really don't know anything about the market. I just kind of got a little 401k. I got a little cash to the side. Mm-hmm. I really don't watch it like that. I really don't pay attention. What would you probably say to that person? Or what would you say to the person that's like, hey, what is a short-term play? Or what is some short-term stuff I can do to, possibly make a profit out of this situation?
Well, I think if you have the volume, if you have the money, you could probably trade the volatility a little bit. Like for example, if you had a day, like say tomorrow, the market sells back down 250 points. If you bought at the close, you might find that Monday morning the thing may jump up 100 points and you could be able to sell it right. So you got to find stocks that have a large volatility level. And those stocks, like I can remember, like in the 90s. You could go to, for example, a thing like Investors Business Daily has a system, and they have a format, and they say, oh, if the stock goes down more than, I don't know what it is, 20%, that's a trigger, you sell it automatically. The thing is that a lot of stocks have very unique trading patterns, and if the market gets hot, like I can tell you, I used to trade Qualcomm a lot. I've been around with Qualcomm for years. Now, this is going way back to the 90s, so this may not apply at all anymore. But at the time when the stock was a really hot stock for a while, there were dozens of days where the stock would trade down more than 50% in one day. And I just knew that stock cold, so I never worried. If I had a chance, I'd buy more. I used to be able to be in and out of it as well as hold it at the same time. I could do both, like a double, because I knew my stock. And I think for if you're not really like going to pay a lot of attention, I think this is a new beginning. I think if you get through this couple of weeks, you may want to look and plant yourself in an index fund and just sit in it for the next 10 years and just enjoy the ride. Because I think, when Reagan got in the 80s, once you straighten stuff out, it took about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, depending on who you talk to. The market took off in 82, and it took off huge. And basically, by 87, it had almost tripled. And you're going to, that's a real stock market. That's what the stock market's supposed to do. It's supposed to triple in a decade. And, and I don't mean triple from like the 1987 low to the next thing, like now, like a lot of people say, well, the stock market's up a lot if you look at the 2008 low. Well, the 2008 low was like a catastrophe. Other things affecting the stock market. Look for Trump to push back and maybe get rid of Dodd-Frank. I think the market would rocket off if you did that. That would start a huge rally.
Oh man, that would.
The financials would go nuts, and all these banks that are beaten up, they go nuts. So that.
So to cut you off, but I wanted you to explain when people say that, hey, if Donald Trump got rid of Dodd-Frank, what is Dodd-Frank?
Dodd-Frank is a huge legislation. Think of it as the Obamacare for the financial services business. After the crisis in 2008, where you basically had, Lehman Brothers, which kind of peaked when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, but you had Bear Stearns go under, you had Merrill Lynch and Bank of America kind of were forced into a shotgun marriage. You had like all that go on, all that chaos because of the CDOs. The government, by I guess it was the next year, they put together this huge bill. It's 2,000 pages, and it was called Dodd-Frank. And what Dodd-Frank was supposed to do is protect consumers and make sure this stuff never happened anymore. That's the way they sold it to people. The reality is Dodd-Frank just basically put everything that was wrong in suspended animation and legitimized or institutionalized a lot of the bad behavior. For example, there's a lot of banks now that are governed under the rule of too big to fail. So they're regulated on this idea that the taxpayer, if they start to go bankrupt, the taxpayers have to bail them out, not might bail them out, have to bail them out. Also, there's a lot of things called key industries that are now also under too big to fail. So these are the kind of things. Now, what that's done is, and the government is kind of taking control of the financial business. They're even trying to put things like the CPFB, I don't know if I got the acronym right, which just was declared unconstitutional by a court. Things like that are trying to tell you what you're allowed to buy and not buy in your IRA. They're trying to control the investment process. And that to me is
saying, hey,
dangerous.
I guess they're trying to say this is too risky, or this shouldn't be in a person's portfolio. He shouldn't be allowed to have that. That's too risky and protect our, whatever. This is a enormous government overreach. And this is again one of the reasons why Trump got elected, because there's a lot of people in this country who are sick and tired of being told what to do, what to think, and the idea that somebody is allowed to do that is really irritating. And this is a case just Obamacare, where with the best intentions, maybe some people might think otherwise, it was like big government overreach, and it didn't really, they used the problem, like Obamacare, what's the problem? Healthcare was expensive. Not everybody could afford it. People would run to emergency rooms because of catastrophic things, right? So what do we, well, we're going to make insurance and everybody's got to buy it. Okay, that was the answer. Well, that didn't really work, as we see now, because premiums are skyrocketing, the health care is mediocre at best, and the deductibles are so big on a lot of these policies, nobody can use them anyway. So basically, you're just paying a tax for something that you can't use.
This is the same kind of thing they try to do with the finance. That's why you don't see any new investment banks. That's why you're not really seeing any growth in banking. You're not seeing any growth in assets. It's just, and what they've done is to prop up these businesses is the Federal Reserve has been printing money. And I know that guys like Larry Kudlow and a lot of these other guys are got to be telling Obama, got to be telling Trump, when you get in there, we got to do something about this Dodd-Frank. This is a threat to the whole financial system. This is not cool. And so I have a feeling probably right after Obamacare, that might be the next big thing. They're going to hit them really hard with that. And
just talks of getting rid of Dodd-Frank, so I can see that rallying the market.
Oh,
like
yeah,
crazy.
that would be huge. I would say if they repeal Obamacare, it's going to end up rallying. You might see the drug stocks and a lot of the companies that make all the medical equipment and things like that, they may all rally like crazy. It may not, but that would be a place I'd be looking, all those kind of things. You gotta free the minds. You gotta open, you gotta allow people to fail, because then you'll create success. People will take risks. And by taking risks, they're going to develop new products. They're going to find new cures. It speeds up the whole process of all this stuff. Yes, sometimes it's very expensive. Sometimes it's very unfair that somebody can only do something just because they can afford it. Okay? But in the long run, think about the computers. When they first started, IBM used to have huge rooms with one big computer, and only a company could afford to buy it. Then what happened? Eventually, guys like Bill Gates came along, and suddenly everybody in the world had a computer. Now everybody's got that computing power in their phone.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it got there, and look at the internet. Let's face it, the internet is the great leveler. Who you are, everybody has access to information. You just got to be able to learn how to use it correctly, and you got to know what to look at, and you got to learn how to decipher what's the fact from the fiction, because everything's on the internet. But like the internet, it used to be, hey, if I was wealthy and connected, I could travel to Europe and I could do all these things. And if you weren't, you would never have those opportunities. But now with the internet, hey, I can go on a virtual tour of Florence right now. I can go to France and look at the winery and do a virtual tour, or I can even talk to a tour guide online about the tour he wants to give me if I fly to France. And we could talk about the wines and everything we're going to taste. It's just like you couldn't have done that like 20 years ago.
People would have had pictures to show you and video to show you. All this stuff.
Right. Everything's at your fingertips. So that kid who's sitting there in some really bad neighborhood in some run place in the middle of nowhere, he can get online. He can look at the Mars rover on Mars just like everybody else can. He can go to NASA's website. He can do all of it's the great leveler. It put everybody. It basically what it's done is it's mass produced a customized solution for everybody. Now, do people use it that way? No, they don't. They watch the Kardashians. They criticize people on Twitter. They spend a lot of time complaining. Like I've noticed the amount of, for example, in some of the other business interests I have, we have a casting company, and we can run you put casting calls out, and you get a certain amount of people who apply. If there's a misspelling in one of the casting calls, you'll get like 10,000 people complaining on the page how there's a misspelling, but yet only 10 people will show up for the casting call. And it's like people seem to be drawn, like are using social media just to vent and complain and criticize and preach, and whereas social media is way beyond, it's way bigger than that. I mean, there's just everything out there. It's like
businesses start off of social media.
Right. There's it's just there's so much stuff, and there's so many options, and you as a person you have to embrace your curiosity and go do it. Well, what Trump is going to probably reintroduce, what's happened is because of all the negatives of 2008 and a bunch of other stuff, we kind of the pendulum really swung, and government got bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's a lot of people running around now who think the government is there to take care of everybody. Guys like Trump are, like I said, they're going to put the band back together. They're going to bring all those Reagan guys in there, and those guys are going to say the government is the problem. We need to shrink the size of government, get government out of the way, so guys like you, entrepreneurs like you, and guys like me, and there's probably people listening to this right now who have some idea to do something that probably would be really cool, but there might be some obstacles to them getting it done. Those guys should be able to do whatever they want. And yeah, they're going to be able to fail. They're going to fail too, and some are going to fail spectacularly. But on the other hand, some are going to really succeed, and some people who are going to fail 5 or 6 times until they succeed, maybe 10 times.
Wow.
And I mean,
That's
if you could talk to anybody, like I heard this interview a couple of days ago with he's one of the hip hop mogul guys who started all the hip hop companies. And, he does movies and Russell Simmons.
Russell Simmons. Okay.
Right, Russell Simmons. And Russell Simmons said, and I've heard a lot of other very successful people say this over and over again, you can't give up. You got to keep at it. And that's also what we talked about with investing. Investing, for a lot of people, one of the things you asked me the last time we talked, why doesn't it work out? And I said the biggest problem is somebody buys something, it goes down $1, and they quit and run away, and they never do anything again. You gotta hang in there. You gotta persevere. It's not going to be perfect. You may not make money the first year you invest. You may not make money for 2 years because Trump may have such a mess to clean up. I want to tell you, the early '80s was so ugly it almost killed the patient. Like when Paul Volcker turned printing presses off and like all kinds of stuff, they started deregulating and everything happened. It was like pandemonium. I mean, companies that were in business for hundreds of years were suddenly out of business. There was leveraged buyouts. There were people who were using the new ways to take advantage and make a lot of money, and some people felt maybe over take advantage. And then there were other people who kind of like couldn't figure out what was going on. They were trying to adjust, and they were getting like steamrolled. And
wow.
This is the nature of a free society. You need that dynamic where people are free to take risks, but when they're free to take risks, they're also free to fail. And what's happened in our culture in the last, I would say, 15, 20 years is we become less and less free to fail, which means we become less and less free. We have we have to be able to take chances. And investing is a leap of faith. When you buy a stock like even GE, you're really taking a little bit of a leap of faith to say, hey, those financial statements, they are what they say they are. They made $2 a share. They really made $2 a share. And sometimes, what happened in 2008 is that became untrue. And it created chaos. But like I can go back to a crisis in the 70s. We had something called the savings and loan crisis, and all these savings banks went out of business, similar to what happened in 2008, because financial bubbles have a tendency to repeat themselves over and over again. And what happened? People in that time, they took all the assets from all the savings and loans and put them in this thing called the Resolution Trust Corp. And it took the Resolution Trust Corp like 13 years to sell off all this stuff and get rid of it. But it liquidated everything over a very long period of time. And I think the government actually made some money by doing it. And some people who lost a lot of money got paid back, we're told. Now, like this time, they didn't do it. They just kind of froze everything. That's why you're reading the papers and you see Deutsche Bank is getting fined for something they did in 2008. And it's 2016. It's 8 years later, and we're still dealing with the same problem because we haven't really fixed it.
You're tuned into The Investor Show with Prince Dykes.
And this is the thing
that is very true. How Dutch Bank just came out the blue with CDOs. I'm like, I thought we got rid of that with Dodd.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And this is the things we just elected a guy who's not invested. He's not invested in Dodd-Frank. He's not invested in Obamacare. He didn't do any of these things. He didn't bet his life to create these bureaucracies. He's a totally a private sector guy. He was on TV. This is why he's like a wild card, or maybe you said like the Trump card. He may be able to really fix everything because he doesn't owe anything to anybody. He's not attached to Obamacare. so he can roll into Washington and say, listen, we got to repeal this thing and fix it. There, we changed the name. We're going to call it Trump Care. It's better already, you see? And like, you know him. He's gonna be patting someone in the back like crazy. And people who like him because he does that. And people who hate him because he does that, right? But this is a great opportunity for everybody to kind of we lost our way. And I think a lot of it started in 9/11, but it even started a little before then. We just got so concerned. Like, look how we are with our kids now. We don't even let them out of our sight for 2 minutes. When I was a kid, I would spend whole days. I wouldn't even see my parents. I'd avoid all adults at all costs. Like, we'd be fishing and catching crayfish and building dams in the river and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. We wouldn't see adults all day long. Now kids can't even go outside for 3 minutes. Everybody's like, have to watch them every single minute. It's like we've lost the ability. We've lost the freedom to fail. And I think with Trump, there's going to be an opportunity. Now, I could be totally wrong, and it won't go that way. And if it does, then it's going to be bad for the market. But I think what I've seen over many years is that as the government grows in size, economic opportunities shrink, and freedom kind of decreases. When government shrinks in size, economic opportunities grow. Because we got to do what we should be doing about 90% of the government anyway. And if you just think a little bit, like a lot of people, I'm sure there's people who listen to this, they belong to a church. The church asks them to put a couple of bucks in the box every week when they come into church. What do they use the money for? Well, they keep up the church, but what do? They feed the homeless. They buy food. They run all kinds of programs. They babysit kids in the afternoon. Well, we did all this before the government did it. It all existed. It was all there. A lot of communities do it anyway because they're abandoned by the government. You know? Yeah. So we have the ability to do all those things. And even in the most awful things, like during periods where there was segregation and things like that, if you had segregation, you still have all those businesses in the segregated sides, like you had the businesses for the white people, let's say, for lack of a better word, and you had the businesses that took care of black people. Well, there was all those businesses. Where did they all go? Right? So exactly. There was all those people cutting hair, cutting lawns, raking leaves, fixing the sidewalks, painting houses, doing all those things. They were doing them. So we need to shed ourselves from this crutch. We all feel like, the government's going to protect us, or we feel safer, or we're too scared to fail. Failing is good. We learn when we fail. We never learn anything when it works out or when we get lucky. And that's why later on go ahead.
Like you said about that, looking back on everything that you just laid out about the new Trump administration, the team they're bringing along, how did this win happen? How does it look like for the market? Things he could do, what people should do and what they could do to take advantage of volatility, taking advantage of long-term indexes. I have all that stuff on my channel here, and stuff like that to tell people how to do all that. But wrapping this thing up, what would you want to leave people with?
Oh, I think that first of all, whatever your negative, wherever you stood politically or whatever your negative thing in your head, or you're worried that whatever, I know girls will say, oh, they're going to do this and they're going to get rid of abortion. And I know people will say we're going to be segregated again, or like some crazy, like I hear all these nutty things like this. Get all that stuff out of your head. It is entirely untrue. That's not what it's about. Now you have a new president. Where did he come from? He's been a businessman in New York City for 40 years, okay? Have you ever been to New York City? I know you have, because that's how we met. You go to New York City, right? Try to not be a people person and not deal with people, not deal with crazy stuff like subway breaking down and traffic and all the things that go on in New York. Try being there and being all these negative things that you hear about, say, Trump, or you've heard, or you're worried about. There's no way you could have survived even 5 minutes in New York. And this is what you got to be confident. You got to say, okay, this may not be my guy. I might have liked her better. But I gotta give him a chance, and let's see if we can get this thing going. And just because you say you want to repeal Obamacare doesn't mean you don't think people should have health care. It means we need a different solution. The problem we tried a solution. It didn't really work. We still have that problem. So now we have to try a different solution. And I think a lot of people get brainwashed into this idea like whatever they did, Obamacare or Social Security before, or Medicare before, but in the past, things like that, that was the only option. No, there's never only one. There's always different ways to do stuff. There's always another way. And one thing you're going to learn about Trump, because I've seen it in New York City for many years before he was a politician, is he is one of those guys who will look at anything and he will always figure out some weird way to do something that everybody looks at. Yeah, that's something totally different. And people will go, I can't believe he did that. Like, wow. And it will seem like, at first, it might seem like a stupid idea, or that's not going to work, or work at the beginning. But all of a sudden, he's going to pull a rabbit out of the hat. All those things that, like, he doesn't listen to people. You know him. He's one of those guys that if you talk to him once, remember every single thing you said to him, period. Trouble forever. He is like, he listens to everything everybody says. All that stuff where he just does, the things you heard about him in the campaign, like he only does it on his own, he doesn't listen to people, that is total nonsense. And so you just have to, like, let's see, we're going to bring in a new group. It's going to be from the 80s, probably. They're going to be, like, that's why I said to put the band back. It's going to be Arthur Laffer. It's going to be growth-driven. It's going to be smaller government. It's going to be more opportunities for people. Mind you, more opportunities to fail. And I think as an investor, I just look at the 80s and then you go into the 90s. The market was 1,000 like 1980. I don't even think it was 1,000. And what was it what did it get to in 2000? By the time, what was it, 1,200 or 12,000 or 14,000? I don't even remember the exact numbers, but think about 20 years you went up that much. So if you would have just bought some index funds in the first 2 years of 1980 and just went to sleep, and then in 2001, after 9/11, even after the market crashed, and you would have said, I'm going to cash out and sell everything, I'm sure you would have made some money.
Definitely. But that's good. That's good, all the information you just put out and stuff like that we just given in this episode. And Trump being the Trump card for Donald being the Trump card for America.
We hope so.
Is he the Donald? He's the thing. And we're gonna end this episode. As always, James, it's always great to have you. It's always great to hear your take on things and sharing your expertise, taking us all the way, back through all the different eras. And I'm sure you're going to be back. It's great to know you and to have you a friend, someone I can reach out. And I'm pretty sure all my fans and stuff like that love to have you as well. But as always, guys, this is the Investor Show. James, you want to say something before we
I just want to say thanks again for having me on. Mm-hmm. It's always a pleasure. It's really a pleasure. You're doing such a great job. And I see from some of the comments on the website and everything, like you have your viewers, your fans, I don't know what you want to call them, your network that's building up. It's because it's like a combination. I think some people really are fans and other people are just trying to get some information. They're trying to learn like everybody else. They're really enthusiastic. I think you just do a great job, and it's just always a pleasure to be on.
Oh, definitely. As always, guys, this is the Investor Show. The producer of the show is always Byron J. Hit him up at Indian Dreams on Twitter. All the other great stuff. And to the next episode, you guys already know what to do. Peace, be safe, and I'm out.